all of you know that Henry VIII had 6 wives, but have you ever stopped to think that this also means he had 6 different weddings? But what were those weddings actually like? Which marriage was called off just one day before the ceremony? Which wedding was overshadowed by an execution? And what did the wives of England's most infamous tyrant wear on the most fateful day of their lives? That's exactly what we're diving into in today's video. So leave your royal like and let's begin. What comes to your mind when you hear the words royal wedding? You probably think of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, or maybe Catherine Middleton and Prince William. In other words, a grand spectacle watched by the entire world. But when it comes to all of Henry VIII's weddings, I am about to surprise you, because not a single one of his 6 marriages was the lavish public celebration we usually imagine. Every single ceremony was incredibly secretive, private, and closed off from the public eye. But don't click away just yet, because that definitely doesn't mean they were boring or lacking in scandal and drama. The most extravagant wedding in Tudor history still remains the first marriage of Catherine of Aragon, to Henry VIII's older brother, Prince Arthur. Henry VII, the father of our infamous wife-collecting king, may have had a reputation for being miserly, but he spared no expense when it came to celebrating this long-awaited alliance with Spain. When the young couple married in 1501, before the eyes of all London at Old St. Paul's Cathedral, the celebrations lasted for 2 entire weeks, and the amount spent would equal roughly $1.2 million in today's money. So, I can only imagine what a huge contrast Catherine of Aragon must have felt when, on June 11th, 1509, she got married for the second time, now to the brother of her dead husband, Henry VIII. Because that day there was no magnificent celebration waiting for her, only a small private ceremony with just 2 witnesses in the Queen's closet at Greenwich Palace. Yes, you heard that right. There were only 2 people at the wedding, besides the couple and the priest. But honestly, I think that despite the modest nature of the ceremony, Catherine was still happy. Ever since Arthur's death in 1502, her future had been painfully uncertain. For 7 long years, negotiations over her possible marriage dragged on endlessly, and the plans kept constantly changing. In fact, Catherine was actually supposed to marry Henry VIII back in 1505, 4 years earlier. But just one day before the planned ceremony, Henry's father convinced the young prince to back out of the marriage for political reasons. Just imagine what Catherine must have felt in that moment, after all those years, when everything suddenly collapsed once again, and she became a rejected bride. But apparently, you can't really escape fate. Catherine still became the very first in Henry's long line of wives after he finally ascended the throne following his father's death. And since a huge part of my audience is women, there's absolutely no way we can avoid talking about everyone's favourite part of any wedding: the bride's dress. It's commonly believed that Queen Victoria introduced the tradition of wearing white for a wedding, but Catherine of Aragon was doing it long before it became mainstream. For both of her weddings, she chose white gowns. Her first wedding dress was a white satin gown in the Spanish style with farthingales beneath the skirt and a white veil. Her second dress was also white, though this time much simpler, and her head was adorned with a golden circlet. At both ceremonies, her hair was worn loose as a symbol of innocence, and you probably remember that Catherine always insisted she had never consummated her marriage with Arthur, and was still a virgin when she married Henry. A description of the ceremony itself has survived. William Warham, the Archbishop of Canterbury, asked the couple, "Is it your will to fulfill the treaty of marriage concluded by your father, the late King of England, and the parents of the Princess of Wales, the King and Queen of Spain, and, as the Pope has dispensed with this marriage, to take the princess who is here present for your lawful wife?" The king answered, "I will." The princess answered, "I will." And that was it. No long dramatic speeches or elaborate vows. After that, the couple simply went to mass. But don't let the simplicity of the wedding ceremony fool you. because just 2 weeks later came the magnificent coronation of Henry VIII and Catherine, and that was where all the money, effort, and preparation had truly gone. There, Catherine finally received everything she had waited so many years for. She fulfilled what she believed was her destiny and became Queen of England, though not forever, only for 24 years, until Henry found himself a new lady of the heart and another candidate for the crown. And as you've probably already guessed, we are now moving on to Henry VIII's second wife, Anne Boleyn, who married her future husband and future executioner, not once, but twice. Yes, you heard that correctly. The first completely secret ceremony most likely took place on November 14th, 1532, after the couple returned from their trip to Calais to meet King Francis I of France. And I say most likely because the entire ceremony was surrounded by such secrecy that the existence of this marriage is confirmed only through the words of the chronicler Edward Hall, who wrote, "The king, after his return, married pruly the lady Anne Boleyn on Seni Erkenward's day, which the marriage was kept so secret." And honestly, the strongest evidence that this marriage probably did happen is the fact that Anne became pregnant soon after. And as you understand, that pregnancy was likely the result of a new stage in their relationship that Henry finally allowed himself to enter once Anne had officially become his wife. It's important not to forget that both at the moment of his first wedding and at the moment of his second one, which took place on January 25th, 1533 at Whitehall Palace, Henry was still officially married to Catherine of Aragon and still had not received permission from the Pope for an annulment. So technically, the king was a bigamist. The ceremony was performed by Roland Lee, a priest loyal to the king, and only a handful of witnesses were present. Henry Norris, who would later be executed for allegedly sleeping with Anne, Thomas Heneage and Anne Savage, Lady Berkeley, Anne Boleyn's close friend, who carried the train of her gown during the ceremony. And once again, I have to repeat just how private and secret this wedding truly was. Even the couple's greatest enemy, Eustace Chapuis, who constantly spied on everything happening at court, only learned about the marriage a month later. Anne's marriage and pregnancy remained a tightly guarded secret until Easter Sunday of 1533, when it was finally publicly announced that she was queen. Then, on June 1st came Anne's magnificent coronation. Apparently, Henry had already developed his favourite pattern by this point. The wedding itself stays as simple and secret as possible, while all the money goes into the coronation. Anne's happy marriage did not last very long. Only 3 years later, on May 19th, 1536, she was executed on charges of adultery, and the marriage she had fought for so desperately, the marriage that had been sealed twice, was officially annulled. Within 24 hours of Anne's execution, Henry was already engaged to his new beloved, Jane Seymour, and only 11 days later, they were married. Timing that shocked even subjects who had already become disturbingly accustomed to the king's outrageous behaviour. Once again, it was a private ceremony attended only by the closest circle of people, and it took place at Whitehall Palace in the Queen's Closet, which creates a very eerie parallel when you realise this was the exact same palace where Henry had married Anne Boleyn, a palace that Anne herself had heavily renovated, and where her presence could still be felt everywhere. Throughout the palace, the intertwined initials HA were still carved into the walls, windows, and ceilings. Servants were now desperately trying to replace them with HJ. By the way, traces of Anne were left in other palaces too. For example, if you visit Hampton Court today, you can still see her intertwined initials with Henry. It's honestly interesting to imagine what it must have felt like for Jane to constantly see them around her. According to David Starkey, the wedding vows would have sounded something like this. Henry, I, Henry, take thee to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. and there too I plight thee my troth. Jane. I take thee, Henry, to my wedded husband, followed by the same vow as Henry's, but with the added promise to be bonny and buxom in bed and board. After this, a reception was held where Jane sat dramatically beneath a great canopy like a queen already taking her place at court. Jane was officially proclaimed queen on June 4th, 1536, on the Feast of Pentecost, the very same religious holiday on which Anne Boleyn's coronation had taken place 3 years earlier. Yet another chilling parallel that reminds you just how cruel Henry's timing could be. But this new marriage, despite finally giving Henry the long-awaited son he had dreamed of for so many years, ended only 17 months after the wedding with Jane's death. And Henry once again found himself in the role of a groom, searching for another wife. You would probably be pretty upset if your future husband said before the wedding, "I must needs, against my will, put my neck in the yoke." And Anne of Cleves most likely experienced that exact mixture of emotions during her marriage to Henry VIII, a marriage Henry tried to avoid almost until the very last possible moment. From the instant they met, it became obvious that this union was doomed and that Henry was deeply disappointed by Anne. But strangely enough, out of all the king's wives, Anne of Cleves perhaps ended up having the most perfect royal wedding of them all. Only 5 days after their first meeting, on January 6, 1540, Henry dressed himself in magnificent attire, a fur-trimmed robe of cloth of gold embroidered with large silver flowers, and made his way to the chapel. At 8 o'clock, Anne appeared, lavishly dressed in a gown of rich cloth of gold, adorned with large flowers made of oriental pearls, fashioned in the rounded Dutch style. Her hair hung loose, and upon her head rested a golden crown decorated with great precious stones. During the ceremony, Henry placed a ring on Anne's finger, engraved with her personal motto, the very symbolic first phrase, "God, send me well to keep." A ring that Anne would return to the king only 6 months later after the marriage was annulled. Afterward, the couple walked hand in hand to the royal chamber to hear mass, and then wine and spices were served. The evening ended with the traditional bedding ceremony. And there is actually a very amusing detail about this whole situation. The marital bed Henry and Anne were led to had an oak headboard carved with erotic images of pregnant cherubs, apparently meant to remind the couple of their marital duties. But they had very little effect on Henry, who by the very next morning had already begun complaining to his courtiers about Anne's appearance, discussing the shape of her body and searching for reasons to divorce her. And those reasons would indeed be found. In July of 1540, the marriage was annulled. But by that point, Henry was already planning a new romance and a fifth wedding. The attention of the aging king was captured by the young Catherine Howard, whom he married only 19 days later on July 28, 1540. Just like with his previous wives, the ceremony was extremely private, though this time it took place far from London at Oatlands Palace, one of Henry's favourite residences. For nearly 10 days, almost nobody knew the wedding had even happened, because Henry wanted to enjoy his new marriage in peace, a marriage he placed enormous hopes in. Only afterward was Catherine officially introduced to the court as queen. But while for Catherine this day became the beginning of something new, for the king's loyal friend and servant Thomas Cromwell, it became the end. The disastrous marriage alliance with Anne of Cleves that Cromwell had arranged for the king became the final nail in the coffin of their relationship, and Henry once again played the card he so often used to get rid of people who were no longer useful to him: execution. Thomas Cromwell was beheaded on Tower Hill for corruption, heresy, and treason, dismissed by Henry as a ragged and beggarly wretch who had served him poorly. And perhaps an execution is not the best foundation for the beginning of a new love story and marriage, because that same young bride who celebrated so joyfully and carefree on that very day would meet her own death at that same place only a year and a half later, also accused of treason and adultery, becoming yet another victim of her own recklessness and youthful infatuation with the king's servant Thomas Culpeper. And at this point, after 5 marriages, you would think that Henry might finally stop in the twilight years of his life. But Henry was never that kind of man. Now the king began searching not simply for another young bride, but for a companion for old age, and his choice fell on Catherine Parr, an attractive and intelligent 30-year-old widow. Catherine did not want to marry the king. She had already been married twice before, first to a sickly young man, then to an elderly husband, and now she finally wanted to marry the person she truly loved, Thomas Seymour, the brother of Queen Jane Seymour. But Henry, sensing a rival in Seymour, sent him abroad and made Catherine an offer she simply could not refuse. Their wedding took place on July 12, 1543 in the Queen's closet, and this time you could practically call it a crowd because around 20 guests attended the ceremony, which, as we already understand by now, was an enormous number for one of Henry's weddings. Immediately after the ceremony, a breakfast reception was held during which everyone was officially informed that Catherine was now Queen. Apparently, by old age, Henry VIII had finally lost his passion for hiding his weddings from the world. For Henry VIII, this marriage would become the last of his life. Though at one point, when a conspiracy arose against Catherine accusing her of heresy, many people at court already believed the king would once again execute his queen and move on to a 7th wife. Some even predicted Catherine Willoughby for the role. I actually have a separate video about the women who managed to escape marriage to Henry VIII, so if you want to dive deeper into that story, you should definitely watch it. But in any case, Catherine Parr escaped that fate and became the final wife of England's infamous wife-collecting king. Though for Catherine herself, this marriage was not the last one. Only 4 months after Henry's death, she finally married her true love, Thomas Seymour, and it caused a huge scandal. She was the Dowager Queen, and the timing was considered far too fast. People believed she should still be mourning her husband, yet she entered a new marriage almost immediately. And honestly, I find that incredibly funny, because Henry himself never really cared much about timing when it came to marriage and always married exactly when he wanted to. So in a way, Catherine ended up paying him back with the very same coin. A wedding day is usually supposed to mark the start of a happy new chapter, but for Henry VIII's wives, it marked the beginning of a life filled with fear, uncertainty, and survival beside one of the most unpredictable and dangerous kings in history. If you could travel back in time, which of Henry's weddings would you want to attend the most? And would you try to stop the bride from making the biggest mistake of her life, or would you let history unfold the way it always did? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.